stream of water that goes through the chutzner. So you need to put a board at each end of the stream to show that the stream isn't a carmelis, it's part of your chutzner. Otherwise, the stream would be a carmelis. You can't take water out of that stream. Very convenient to have a stream going through your courtyard. You get water and put your wastewater and all of that. But it's also considered a carmelis if it's 10 tvachim deep, 4 tvachim wide. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in the Mishnah was that you don't need anything because you have a wall that surrounds your courtyard and it's not necessary. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis taught right after the Mishnah. The rabbis taught asala b'knisa v'le'asala b'yitzia. Let's say they made wall for the a wall in the stream for the entrance, but not for the exit of the water. Let's see. I'll pull up a picture. Or the opposite, asala b'yitzia v'le'asala b'knisa. If they did it for the exit, but not for the entrance. So, ein memalim menu b'Shabbos is not good enough. Elem kein asala mechitza yud tvachim b'yitzia b'knisa. You need to have both. Bring this down. What are we holding here? This is page of Zion. Okay, so that's our courtyard. There's a wall there, which Rabbi Yehuda accepts. The Tanna Kamma doesn't accept. They say that you need to put a mechitza underneath that wall, or anywhere actually, it doesn't need to be underneath that wall, anywhere in here to show that this is not considered the carmelis that it is when it leaves, that it's considered a Rosh Yachid. Okay, and you need to have on both ends, the entrance water and the exit. Rabbi Yehuda says, you don't need anything. There's a wall that's surrounding your courtyard, that's good enough. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is mechitza tluya, a hanging mechitza is good. We said before that we don't hold of a mechitza tluya. We had a problem with the sukkah that the wall didn't reach the floor. We said, I know you want to make it a halachic wall, but if the goats are going to walk under it, then it's not a real wall. And Rabbi Yehuda didn't hold of that. Rabbi Yehuda, we actually compared Shabbos to Sukkah. We said they didn't really connect. But either way, that's the concept, that a hanging wall doesn't work. It needs to be starting on the bottom. That's the opinion of the Tanna Kamma. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda proves this point. It says, there was a stream. It went from Ovel to Tzipari. And people would take out water in their courtyards. And the elders were there, and they allowed it. The sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya, you bring a proof from that stream. It wasn't the right size. It wasn't the right size. It wasn't the carmelis. That stream, either it wasn't deep 10 tvachim, or it wasn't wide enough. And so therefore it wasn't the size. So your proof is from a story that wasn't accurate. We have a lot of incidents like this where Rabbi Yehuda brings stories and they tell him that the story is not a proof because it's missing a detail. Okay. Tanya Idach, there's another brisa. Amasamayim ha'iveres benachalenas. There's a stream of water that goes by the windows of the houses that are in the courtyard. Pachis migimel, less than 3 tvachim. This is a very vague, an ambiguous phrase, pachis migimel. What is pachis migimel? We don't have a clue what it's talking about. We're going to try this and try that and try to figure out what's going on over here. Whatever the case is, mishal shel dli umamale. In this instance, you're allowed to put a bucket on a rope and lower it down into the water and take the water out. Gimel, if it's already Gimel Tvachim, what's Gimel Tvachim? We don't know yet. But in Mishal Shel Diamal, then you're not allowed to. Reb Shimon Gamliel Eimer, Pachis Midalid Mishal Shel Diamal. he has a bigger measurement. He says 4 tvachim. It's up to 4 tvachim you can use a string on a pail and put it into the water and bring it up. But dalet ein mishashon d'liyam amalet. Now, from prior knowledge, my first guess in reading this is that in general we have a machlekes between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan in the din of lavud. All the sages hold that lavud, anything that's within 3 tvachim is considered attached. It's considered a solid. And Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says lavud is 4 tvachim. I'd say it's referring to that, but it doesn't. What does it have to do with anything? Okay, the Gemara asks right away, b'maya skinam. What are we dealing with here when we say that under 3 tvachim, it's good. More than 3 tvachim, you have a problem. What is the 3 tvachim that we're talking about? And then Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says the same thing, but with 4 tvachim. Gufa. Are you talking about that the stream is going by the windows? Are you talking about that the stream is 3 tvachim, and then it's no good, or if it's less than 3 tvachim, then you can use it? Rab Dimi came. He was a traveler, and he taught a teaching in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. His teaching was Ein Karmelis Pchusim Midalet. That was his teaching. That a Karmelis is never less than 4 tvachim. Karmelis is that intermediate area. It's like a middle zone. It's not a Rosh Hashanah, it's not a Rosh Hashanah, but it's considered its own defined rishus. It's the rishus of a Karmelis. What do we say as a Karmelis? An area that's not enclosed, but it's a private area. An area, a sea is a Karmelis. We said the ocean is a Karmelis. Something that's 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide, like we're learning over here, is a Karmelis. He says a Karmelis is never less than 4 tvachim wide. Let's say that when Rav Dimi said this name of Rabbi Yochanan, he wasn't saying it according to all opinions. It's only one opinion, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that it needs to be 4 tvachim. Under 4 tvachim, under 4 tvachim is fine. Who holds that? Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. But according to the Rabbanan, it's really under 3 tvachim is fine. So shall we say that what Rav Dimi said is not according to everyone? It's not unanimous. Ella, the Gemara says that's not the pshat. It's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about if a Karmelis is 3 tvachim or a Karmelis is 4 tvachim. Ella ba'gafel lahachlef. We're talking about a special case. Let's bring up the picture and you'll see it. We're talking about that you're putting it on the banks of this little stream. Here's our picture. We're talking about that if the bank, this is agapel, if the bank is less than 3 tvachim, then it's considered a makam p'tur. And the makam p'tur, you could put it on a makam p'tur and take it back in. You could put it on from a makam p'tur, we had a rule that you can take from Rosh Hashanah and put it on a makam p'tur if it's directly right there. And we had another rule that from Rosh Hashanah you can put on a makam p'tur. We mentioned the levad shel yachlef. So here what we're saying is that if there's no wall that's making this into Rosh Hashanah, the stream is not a Rosh Hashanah, the stream is a Karmelis, but there's a makam p'tur here of 3 tvachim, or less than 3 tvachim, or less than 4 tvachim, depending on which opinion. So then you can put it on it and you can bring it into the Karmelis, back onto the Karmelis, into the Rosh Hashanah. We'll see. There's a problem here with the Gemara is going to spell it out. The Gemara says, one second. We have a problem. When Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Makim Shein Bayar Ba'al Abba Mut Levnei Rishus Yachid Levnei Rishus Rabim Lekatif Alav Levad Shelo Yachlifu. If you have an area that's considered a makam p'tur, an exempt area, and it's in between Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Yochanan says that the people from the Rosh Hashanah can put their items on it, and they can take it back in. People from Rosh Hashanah can put items on it and take it back. But there was a rule there that you can't take it from, you can't put it, the Bnei Rosh Hashanah can't put it on it and pass it over to the Rosh Hashanah, even though it stopped in a free zone in the middle. But you weren't allowed to do that. And over here, you're telling me that you are allowed to do it. You're putting it from the Rosh Hashanah, the bucket, onto the agape, onto the banks. And from there, you're moving it over to the other area, the area of the Carmelis. My answer is that's not a problem because Hasam Rishayis Deraisa. Over there, I had an issue because it was Rishayis Deraisa. I was going from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. We said that you weren't allowed to do that. But over here, Hacha Rishayis Derabanan, over here it's only rabbinic. Okay, Rashi on the bottom of the page. Brings out a little bit of an issue, an obvious issue. What's considered a makam p'tur? We said she'im bayar ba'al arba. It's not resolving our issue. Our real issue was that the rabbi said it needs to be gimel tvachim. So we sort of like sped through this, but there was a point over here that's getting lost, and that is that we had a machlekes between the Rabbanan and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel if the banks need to be 3 tvachim or 4 tvachim. If you're going to tell me that we're dealing with a makam p'tur and it's lakativ, so what is the Rabbanan saying? That it's 3 tvachim, that once it's 3 tvachim, it's already too much. So Rashi says that, let's say like this. The Rishayis Deraisa what's a makam p'tur? Makam p'tur is that it's bottled to each side. Until it's 4 tvachim, we say that this area is nullified to the Rosh Hashanah. This area is nullified to the Rosh Hashanah. And that each one has like a power over it. So it's like bottled to each side. So the Bnei Rosh Hashanah can put it on it, and Bnei Rosh Hashanah can put it on it. That's until 4 tvachim. However, the Rishayis Derabanan don't have the same power to make it nullified to it. And so it's only going to be nullified to it unless it's 3 tvachim. So what we're saying here is that the makam p'tur switches for Rishayis Deraisa as well, even though Bavad Shala Yachlef for sure switches. It for sure is different if it's a Deraisa or Derabanan. Passing it from one domain to the free zone, from there to the other domain, that's usher by, or Rishayis Deraisa, by private to public. What about from private to a Carmelis? We said that's not a problem. But besides for that, there's one other aspect, and that's the 3 tvachim that also switches according to the Rabbanan. That normally a makam p'tur is daled, but a makam p'tur that's next to Rishayis Derabanan is 3. But that's what Rashi says. It's an interesting thing. The Gemara asks 1 second. What are you telling me that you can't switch from, you can't go from Rosh Hashanah to a free zone, to a makam p'tur, to a Rosh Hashanah? That's only because it's a deraisa. Those rishayos are biblically defined as different rishayos. But if it's a Rosh Hashanah to a Carmelis, which is a rabbinic distinction, maybe it should be allowed, according to Rabbi Yochanan. It's not true. Rabbi Yochanan says that you can't do it. Where do we see that? It goes like this. Tanya, or the Tanan, started in the Mishnah. Kaisel shebein beis chatzeres. We had this Mishnah before. If there's a wall dividing 2 courtyards, it's 10 tvachim high, and it's 4 tvachim wide. They need, because there's no door between these 2 courtyards, they can't make one Eruv. They need to make 2 separate, 2 independent Eiruvin for each of these courtyards. The wall between them divides them. Why does it have to be 4 tvachim? Any wall would divide them. That's regarding the other halacha that we're about to say. Let's say on top of the wall there were fruits. So who owns the wall? Which side? So elu oilam mikan va'eichlin ve'elu oilam mikan va'eichlin. Each one can go up onto that wall and eat the fruits that are on top of the wall. It doesn't say they can take it off the wall. It says they can go up there and eat it up there. Nifritza kaisel. Say the wall broke. Ad eser amas. If it broke until 10 amas, which means it's like a doorway. Ma'arvin shnayim. They can still make 2 Eiruvin because it's just a wall with a door. It doesn't mean that it's one property. And they can also make 1 Eruv because there's a door. They can consider it one property. It's like a doorway. Yaiser mikan, if the wall is broken more than 10 amas, then they have 1 Eruv and not 2 because there's no wall. A breach in the wall more than 10 amas is considered the wall isn't there. It's much more than a doorway. We asked them this. You were telling me about a wall that's 10 tvachim high and 4 tvachim wide. Let's say it's not 4 tvachim wide. Say it's thinner than that. Let's say the wall isn't 4 tvachim wide. What's going to be with those fruits on top? It's a machlekes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Those are the same generation, first generation Amirai. Amar Rav, Avir Beis Rishuyas Sheletes Bay Velayazes Bay Malaynima. Rav says that when you go up on the wall, it's not 4 tvachim. It's not its independent rishus. Both rishuya, both sides of the courtyard have jurisdiction over that wall. So therefore, where's the line between both properties? It's all over the place. Every spot is considered the line. So therefore, you can't move when you go up to eat a fruit on top of the under 4 tvachim wall. You can't move it even 1 drop because when you move it, you've crossed the line. Every spot is the line. That's Rav. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Eila Malam Mikan Vayichlin, Ve'eila Malam Mikan Vayichlin. It says Malan. Each one can bring up and eat on the top. And the Gemara explains. In other words, it's even more lenient than if it would be 4 tvachim. Va'az the Rabbi Yochanan Tamei, and Rabbi Yochanan follows his reasoning. The Chiyasar Rav Dimi, Rabbi Yochanan Makam. When Rav Dimi came, he says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan Makam Shein By Arba Al Arba Mutlav Bnei Rishus Rabba Bnei Rishus Yachal Lekatev Alav V'Vad Shleich Lifa. We quote Rabbi Yochanan saying that in this case, each one can go onto this makam p'tur. It's under 4 tvachim. It's a makam p'tur, and they can have they can eat their fruits there. And we quote Rabbi Yochanan saying, "B'vad shleich lifu." Now here I have 2 rishus hayachid. This is clearly rabbinic. That means that Rabbi Yochanan says even by rabbinic domains, or rabbinic distinction between domains, that you're not allowed to exchange from one domain to the other, just because it went through a free zone, a makam p'tur. This is a question. It was rather a long question, but from the top of the page until here was the question. What are you telling me that if it's Rishuyas Derabanan you're allowed? Rabbi Yochanan holds Rishuyas Derabanan it's not allowed. The Gemara answers, Hahi Ze'iri Amra. That story, going back, that says that if it's that Rishuyas Derabanan, you can go from one to the other. In Karmos Putani Daled. Oh, the one that said that you're allowed to go up. That you're allowed to go up and you can eat it up there, according to Rabbi Yochanan. That is referring to, as long as you don't, that this halacha, that you can't switch by your Rishuyas Derabanan from one to another is Ze'iri. You're right. Rabbi Yochanan said that. But it was said over by Ze'iri. That was Ze'iri's opinion of what Rabbi Yochanan holds. Ze'iri was, I guess, another student of Rabbi Yochanan. So we're saying like this. Really, Rabbi Yochanan holds that by Rishuyas Derabanan there's no problem. To go from one domain to the next domain via a Makom P'tur. Bavad Shla Yachlef doesn't apply to Rishis Derabanan. You just quoted a whole statement on a Mishnah and with Rabbi Yochanan that there is a problem. That's Ze'iri. The Gemara says, 1 second. L'Ziri Kashaha. You're not resolving the issue. You're taking the issue off Rav Dimi. That's great. But the problem is still there. If it says this, B'vad Shela Yachlef, so then how do you go back to what we were learning before, started on the previous page, that I can take from one domain from your window and put it onto the bank of the river and then pass it over from the bank of the river into the Carmelis, according to Ze'iri? I can't do that. How does it work? How does Ze'iri explain that? Because you put the blame on someone else, but you didn't resolve the issue. You have to answer for Ze'iri. The Gemara answers, Ze'iri makon l'bama samayim gufa b'ravdimi tanoihi. What was your issue? Why couldn't you say that when we said it, we had a discussion about if we said Rabbanan say once it's 3 tvachim there's a problem. Rab Shimon Gamliel says once it's 4 tvachim there's a problem. We said what is 3 tvachim? What is 4 tvachim? So we attempted to say that we're talking about the width of the river, of the stream. I said no, you can't say that. Because why can't you say that? Because Rav Dimi came and said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that a Makom P'tur, or rather a Carmelis, there's no Carmelis less than 3 tvach, less than 4 tvachim. And if you're going to say that the Rabbanan say that there's a Carmelis less than 4 tvachim, then Rav Dimi his halacha is not according to all opinions. So we said, okay, we're not going to say that that's the issue here. We're going to say the issue here is the banks are 3 tvachim. The bank, not the river itself. Because why are we saying the banks? Because we don't want Rav Dimi to have a statement that doesn't fit with everyone's opinion. So if we go now, Ze'iri says that you can't exchange from off the banks to the water. So therefore, what are we talking about over there? That there's a difference between if it's 3 tvachim or 4 tvachim, that machlaikas. Say we're not talking about the banks because according to Ze'iri you can't use the banks. It doesn't help. We're talking about the river. You said you didn't want to say that. Yeah, that's a problem for Rav Dimi. Ze'iri is not concerned that Rav Dimi's halacha was. As I can learn a different pshat in the whole brisa that we're dealing with, that the river itself is 3 tvachim. And there's the Rabbanan hold that a Carmelis is 3 tvachim. For Rav Dimi Tanai, and Rav Dimi's statement, the name of Rabbi Yochanan about the size of a Carmelis, it's Machlekes Tanai that fits with Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, right? Is that Rab Shimon? With Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, but it doesn't fit with the Rabbanan. Okay, the Gemara says, a general question. I know that this river is wide. It's a shear. However, we're going to learn this. Outside of this courtyard, it has a shear of a Carmelis. It is a Carmelis. It's only as it enters this courtyard, and I put up a wall, and this and that, so it becomes a Rishus HaYachid. The problem is if I have a wall next to a Rishus HaRabim, and I throw something and it goes into a hole into that wall, even though the wall is bordering a Rishus HaYachid, it's called Chayre Rishus HaRabim. I'm chayiv. And it doesn't have it clearly its own domain is considered Chayre Rishus HaRabim. So here what we're saying is, we're asking us a question. We're saying that this stream is coming from outside the courtyard. And outside the courtyard, it's a Carmelis. It's considered Chayre Carmelis. So what it's going, it's right over here. I have a wall, but it should be considered chayre karmelis. Should be aser, even if it's less than a shear. It's not asking about the wall. It could be the wall will switch it. It's asking if it's less than the shear. If it's less than the shear of a karmelis, it should be chayre karmelis. Okay. Gemara says, Abaya baravin, Rav Chanina baravin, Dami tavayo ein chayrin lekarmelis. It's an easy teretz. It doesn't exist. There's a chayre rishus harabim, because that's a real domain. But we don't have chayre karmelis. It's an extension on an extension on a rabbinic law. The whole karmelis is rabbinic. There's no ein chayre in the karmelis. There's no, a chayre means a hole. When we say there's a hole in the wall, that's considered the rishus harabim. That we say for rishus harabim. We don't say a hole in the wall is considered a next to a karmelis. That's a chayrin of that's a hole for a karmelis. Ravashi Amar. Ravashi has another teretz. Afilu temi yesh chayrin lekarmelis. Even if you do say that there is this small area that's attached to a karmelis that remains a karmelis, hani mili besmucha. That's only if it's very close to it. Abel b'maflegas. But if it's far away from it, then it's not a problem. What are we dealing with here? Dealing with here that it's quite a distance upstream. It gets wider, whatever. So that's not considered a chayrin for a karmelis because it's too far away. The original karmelis is too far away. Ravina Amar Kagain David La Nifke Apuma. Ravina has his own teretz. Goes back to what's the pshat over here in Rab Shimon ben Gamliel in the Rabbanan. They had an argument about a window that's outside, that's next to the stream. It goes by these windows, and are you allowed to put the bucket out the window to get the water? It depends if it's 3 tvachim or 4 tvachim. According to the Rabbanan, once it's 3 tvachim, then it becomes a problem. Less than 3 tvachim was fine. According to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, once it's 4 tvachim, it's a problem. Less than that was fine. We didn't know what we were talking about. Are you talking about the stream? Are we talking about the banks? What's the 3 tvachim and the 4 tvachim? Ravina says, you're not talking about either. You're talking about that you made a wall as you were supposed to in the valley, in the channel of the stream. But the wall has an inlet and an outlet. So you put there's a gap in that wall that allows water in. Well, how big is that gap? The gap, according to the Rabbanan, is 3 tvachim, and the gap, according to the Shimon ben Gamliel, is 4 tvachim. Now it goes back to something that we knew the whole time, that the Rabbanan hold that lavad is 3 tvachim, so the gap is considered closed if it's under 3 tvachim. And according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, lavad is 4 tvachim, so it's considered closed. We're just talking about the mechitza. This is what we understood the whole time, that's the machlekes, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan. Okay, we started the Mishnah. Gezuscha shilamayla min hamayim. We learned this before. Platforms that are sticking out of a wall that's above a stream of water that's under it, or the ocean that's under it. Ein memalim mena b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to fill water from off the platform up onto the platform. You're not allowed to dip the bucket in. Elam kenas lamechitza gvaya asar tvachim, unless you make a fence around the platform or around the hole that you made in the platform, because you're dipping the bucket through a hole possibly. Bein milmayla, bein milmata. Whether you make the fence standing up or whether you make the fence going downwards. Let me see if there's pictures here. Oh, that's Ravina. This is the answer of Ravina. Yeah, Here we're talking about the platform with a hole in it, and you can make a mechitza around it. This is what he's showing you here, that you can make a mechitza around it. Okay, here you see the hole. This was something we learned before. If you had a pit, if you make the mechitza lower down, that's not in our text. Okay. The same as if you have two platforms, and those two different apartments or houses here, and each one made a platform, a porch, outside of his window or outside of his door, and one of them is above the other one. So, let's say the one on the upper part, the upper platform, made a hole with a mechitza. The lower one didn't. We're going to see that there's going to be a difference here. Made it, and there's no Eruv. They didn't make an Eruv between each other, so they really can't carry it from one house to the other. So Shtei Masur said Shi'ar. Then the lower one can't use the other person's fence to throw his bucket up, to get it into the Carmelis below, the water below, to take it back up into Rosh Hashanah, and consider it that, oh, there's a fence there, so I'm allowed, because he really can't go from his domain to his friend's domain anyway. The fence is great, but he can't get from his domain to his friend's domain because they didn't make an Eruv. The Gemara right away says, we said that you need a mechitza. What's a mechitza? Mechitza means you made a hole in the platform to be able to put the bucket down into the water, to draw the water up. But that's not enough. The hole in the platform isn't enough. You need to then make a fence around the platform or around the hole. 10 tvachim. Hanani ben Akavya, we learned yesterday, says that I can do something called kayef. I can bend the floor of the platform figuratively, not actually, halachically. You bend it down, and the floor itself is considered a mechitza. If the floor of the platform, the base of that platform, was 4 amas, we said that, so the 4 amas was 24 tvachim. So then 4 tvachim will be the hole, and 10 tvachim on each side will be the wall. It's a halachic wall, a fictitious wall that you just bend the sides. We didn't say that in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is obviously not Reb Chanani ben Akavya, or else you wouldn't need the whole mechitza thing. Gemara says, Tanya, we start in the Bryce, Chanani ben Akavya, Gzus sheshesh b'dalet al dalet ames, chayk b'dalet al dalet, and mamali, it's good enough. You just have the 4x4. Just the floor, just the platform is good enough. Rabbi Yechon Mishum Risi V'zim lehit Reb Chanani ben Akavya la b'yama shel Tveria. Not necessarily. Could be that Rabbi Chanan ben Akavya actually holds that you need a mechitza. Rabbi Chanan ben Akavya was just talking about in the Yam Shel Tveria, the Sea of Tveria in the Kinneret. So over there, the banks were very defined, and Yesh La'Oignin, it had a clear side to the perimeter of the sea, and so that was considered a wall. And there were cities that were around it, and those cities were walled off the area, the karfifes, and they also had parks that had walls. Now maybe those walls don't help, but it's good enough for a sniff to add to the heter of the Sea of Tveria that I don't need a special mechitza. I can use the platform itself as if it's bent down, and that will help me. But really, in other oceans and other areas, in Venice, then I'm gonna need a mechitza that goes into the water to allow me to take the water out. Tana Rabbanan, start in a brisa. I have an old Gemara here, but it says, my Gemara, it says Nun Devarim. Like, wow, this is going to be a long piece. The Gimel was messed up, and then I looked at another text. Okay. Gimel Dvarim, Hitter Rabbi Chanani ben Akavya, L'Anshe Tveria. Three things Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya allowed for the Anshe Tveria, people of Tveria. Got three heterim from Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya. Memala mayim miguzuscha b'Shabbos. You can fill up water through a hole in a platform on Shabbos, even without the walls, even without the mechitzas 10 tefachim either going up or going down, around, surrounding the water to sort of like fence in the water that you're using. You don't need that. The platform itself is the wall. The taimnim ba'atza. Taimnim ba'atza. Atza are bean pods, and I can put fruits into these bean pods, and it doesn't become. It's not mekabel tuma. In other words, I guess it's really. Why am I putting the fruits in it? I'm not sure. Maybe it keeps it fresh or something. I don't know. But even though these bean pods may have become wet, well, it's not going to affect my fruit. I'm mastapkin baluntis, and I'm allowed to dry off with a towel on Shabbos. Now, on Yom Tov, could be with hot water, and on Shabbos, it could be with cold water. A person can go into cold water on Shabbos, and if he's hot or whatever, l'kara, I think it says, to cool off. He's allowed to use a towel, and we're not concerned that you're going to squeeze out the towel. So we go back and we explain these three heterim. The fact that you can take water that through a platform on Shabbos without having walls, that we explained. What are you talking about when you say you can put fruits inside atza, which is these bean pods? What are you saying? The Tanya, it says, Hishkim lahavi pseilas. Someone wakes up in the morning early. He wants to get these bean pods. He brings them from the field. He wants to use them to put his fruits in them. I don't know exactly. It's some sort of protection. The problem is that there's dew on the pods. Now, if he wakes up early, he'll get the pods that have the dew on them, and he'll be able to use that to protect his fruits. Now, it depends why he woke up early. If he woke up early because he wants to get the dew, that means he wants the moisture on the pods, and that moisture makes fruit susceptible to tumah. That was the rule, that in order for something to become fruits to become impure, it has to become wet. And it has to become wet in a way that you wanted it to become wet. If you never wanted it to become wet, then it's not a problem. It's b'chiyutan. That's what the Gemara learns, that it needs to be that you desired it to become wet. So why did you wake up early to get the pods? Possibly because you wanted the moisture there. Oh, you wanted the moisture, it's v'chshalakabel tumah. There's another possibility. You woke up early because that's the only time to get things done. You have to get everything done before 10 o'clock. And that's most of your work. So because the rest of the day you have to go sit in the office. So it's not, you didn't get up early because of the dew. You woke up early because that's the only time to do anything in the field. So then it's not b'chiyutan. So what did Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya say? He said it's no problem. I know you're getting up early to use these pods and the pods are wet, but people in Tveria had jobs. And Stam, people of Tveria had jobs. So the moisture, the dew that's on these pods wasn't that you desired that. You did it early in the morning because you wanted to get to work. So, okay. Mustapkin baluntis mahi. What was the heter of using a towel? The Tanya was started in a brayso. Mustapkin baluntis. A person can use a towel. And you can put it in the window to dry. Don't give the towel back to the people that run the bathhouse. It's a problem. They are chashud. They're suspected on something. Doesn't even makes it look like terrible. Davar is over here. It's referring to squeezing. They're going to squeeze on Shabbos. It's surprising that it has to use that term. Oisei davar. Usually that's a term for something very bad, and we don't want to say it, But over here it means that they're going to squeeze. I guess that was the topic of discussion. So they're suspected on that matter of squeezing it out, so you don't pass it to them. You can even take it home. We're not talking about Eiruvin here. We're talking about taking it home. While you're going to carry it home, maybe you're going to wring it out. You're going to wring out the towel. We're not chayshish that you're going to do that. We don't suspect that you're going to wring it out, so it's not a problem. Okay, those were the three things. Back to what we're talking about. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rabbi Rav Huna says, we're talking about the guzustra, the getting water off a platform. Leishanu al males. That's only if you're filling the water. You need water, so you dip the bucket down and you take water out. What about wastewater on Shabbos? But you can't pour the wastewater back in, even though you have that machitza. Water to take out, where am I getting the water from? Directly beneath my machitza. It's considered a rishus hayachid. Machitza tluya hangs down, and it's considered like it travels down all the way into the water, and the water that I take up is coming from a rishus hayachid, and I'm bringing it to rishus hayachid. It's not considered a karmelis because of the fence, the wall that's going down. However, if I'm going to pour water out into that, then it's a problem. No, the obvious problem is that when you pour it out, it's traveling right out of those mechitzas. When you're taking the water up, you took it from beneath the mechitza into rishus hayachid. Pouring it out, you're pouring it into the karmelis. Now, via the water that's directly beneath you, but okay. The Gemara asks, Maskafa Rav Shizbi. Rav Shizbi asks a question. What's the difference between this and an uka? An uka, we're going to learn in the next Mishnah, is a wastewater pit. We said that in certain courtyard, you can pour your wastewater into the courtyard. Except if your courtyard is very small, then it's considered that we're not without the issue of water and grass and that. Let's say there's no issue of that. The issue is that you pour it into the courtyard, it's going to go run out into the street. So if the courtyard is more than 4 amos, then it's fine. But if it's less than 4 amos, then we have a concern. You pour it out, you're basically pouring it into the street. The area that you poured it into is too small to contain it. It's going right out. So it says, but you can pour it into an uka. Even though your courtyard is too small, the uka is a wastewater pit. You pour the water into that pit. Now, let's say the pit is filled. You said this is not a problem. So why are you making a problem over here of pouring water through the hole in the platform? And it's going to spill over when it hits the bottom into the sea. It's going to spill over and it's going to travel out of my mechitzas. You didn't have a problem when it was a uka. I poured the water in. It's going to spill over and run out into the rishus harabim. It says hani taimi v'hani leitaimi. By the uka, there's an absorption. It absorbs into the ground. Over there, you're pouring it into water. There's no absorption. Ikadamri, some say it a little different. It's more than a little different. They say exactly the opposite. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna leitem l'malas udashari lishbech aser. Don't say that you're only allowed to take the water out, but you're not allowed to pour the water in. Rather, you're even allowed to pour the water back through the fence and the hole, and you're allowed to do it. It's exactly the opposite. Amar Rav Shizvi pshita hainu uka. Rav Shizvi says that's obvious. You're allowed to pour it into a wastewater pit in the courtyard, and there's no problem, even though it's going to spill over. We know you can pour it back. The Gemara says no. It's a chiddush. Because could say that there's a difference because by the pit, there's absorption into the ground. But when you pour it into the ocean, there's no absorption of the water into the water. So it's going to automatically spill over and it's going to leave your rishus hayachid channel there, like tube that's going into the water. Kamash malan, and we're not worried about that. And doesn't bother us and if it's going to spill over. Okay. The same as with two platforms. We said if there's two platforms, one above the other, so we had a problem of Eiruvin. And if the upper one made a hole with a fence, the lower one that didn't make an Eruv with the upper tenant can't use that gezustra to lower their bucket through because there's no Eruv. We said more than this. We said not only the lower one can't, but the upper one also can't. Because the lower one has access to that, so then they needed an Eruv. So Aval b'mefleges, but let's say they're far apart. Let's say the two platforms are not close enough to have easy access from the lower one. It's really like this, from the lower one to the upper one. They're too far apart. So then the whose platform is that up there? It's only the upper one. So then there's no reason. It's not considered a common area because it's too difficult for the lower one to access that, as we learned before. That if one has more difficult access, then we say that area belongs to the one with the easy access. But if it's distant one from the other, then it's going to be mutter. This is Rav Huna saying it in the name of Rav. Rav was his teacher. Rav follows his teaching. If it's not access through walking, Rav says that that's not considered access. So you don't aser on the other one through derech avir. There's no steps there or whatever. It's just through the air. That's not considered access. Amar Rabba, Amar Rab Chia, Rab Yosef, Amar Rab Aishia. Rabba says name of Rab Chia, Rab Yosef says name of Rab Aishia. Rab Chia and Rab Aishia were friends. They edited the Brises together. They said this statement like this: Yesh gezel b'Shabbos. If a neighbor, your neighbor has a chorva, a broken down house, which, as is common, if there's an open lot next to your that no one's living in, you're going to end up using it. Now, you don't need to make an Eruv according to this, Yesh Gezel B'Shabbos. The fact that you use this area, you stole it, you don't have rights to it, but it's just no one's there. So everything, you just go in there and put things there, whatever. It's considered like you stole that area. And on Shabbos, you don't need an Eruv. You stole it. It's like, it's in your Rishus. It's, okay, then the following statement contradicts this. It says, V'churva machzer l'baylam. And the area, because of Shabbos, because you didn't make an Eruv, that returns it back to the owner. The Gemara says, 1 second. Hagu fakashi. You just said a contradiction. Amrit yesh gezel b'Shabbos. You said that there's gezel b'Shabbos. That means that this area that's next to you is like in your property. You stole it. Alma kanya. That's the aleph. Alma kani. It sounds like it's yours. But we said that the broken down, the ruins, goes back to the owners. That's because it's Shabbos, you didn't make an Eruv, it goes back. I mean, it's like that it's not yours. The Gemara says, Hachikama. What it means is, Yesh din gezel b'Shabbos. Not that it's stolen and it's in your property, it's already stolen items that you own, that you've taken. No, there's a halachas of gezel, and what's the halachas of gezel? That you have to return it. It's not yours. Gezel means not that it's yours. Gezel means that it's not yours. Ketzad, the churva machzeh l'baylam. And how is this? Because it has to go back to its own. I know the whole week you're using it, but on Shabbos it becomes very definite that it's not yours because there's no Eruv and you can't use it. Amar Rabba u'masvina nashmaita. We use this as a question on our Mishnah. What happens when you have two properties, two apartments, and they're above the water? We said that the upper one would have been able to use his if no one else was there. Now the problem is that there's a lower one there, and he wants to use the upper one, and they didn't make an Eruv, so there's a problem. It says, the lower one doesn't have permission to use the upper one. What are you telling me that they needed to make an Eruv? They have no right. You would only need an Eruv for if the upper one says, get out of my property, this is not yours. So I'm allowed to, the upper one should be allowed to use it. The lower one would make the upper one usher if he had rights to that area, would be considered a common area, but he doesn't have any rights to it. It's his own. Even in a chutzner where you need to make an Eruv, but in your own house, you're allowed to carry. No one else has rights to my house. The common areas where we have a problem. So over here, it's not a common area, it's the guy's own platform. So Amar Rav Sheisha, well, change the case to make it work. They made a partnership. They made this mechitza with together. If so, what are you telling me? That if the upper one made it, it's a problem. If the lower, and it says, I think it say the and you didn't make for the lower one. What happens if you make for the lower one? If it's b'shutvis, it's still a common area. Why does making it for the lower one do anything, help at all? You made it for the upper one, it's asr. As long as you didn't make it for the lower one, you didn't make a hole with the mechitza for the lower. The Gemara answers, once the lower one makes it, then what he's saying is, I don't need yours. So then they become separated. And then they're separated, then the upper one could use his and the lower one would use his. Okay, let's learn the Mishnah. I'm sorry. We had this Mishnah earlier today. We quoted it. If there's a courtyard that's less than 4 amos, so you can't pour water into that courtyard because immediately the water is going to go right out of the courtyard into Rosh Hashanah, unless you made a wastewater pit that can. How big does that pit need to be? It needs to be able to hold 2 sa. Sa is 144 eggs. So, and it needs to be minaneka from where the water is going to drain out. It has to be able to hold that. Here's a chiddush. The uka doesn't need to be in your property. It could be right outside your property in the Rosh Hashanah as well. Because when you pour it, it goes from your property straight into that drain that's in the public property. The only thing is, I'm sorry, if you're doing it outside your property in the public area, then there needs to be a drain cover over it. So it's not going into the Rosh Hashanah. It's going from your property under the Rosh Hashanah, under the drain cover. If it's in your own property, you don't need a drain cover. Likmar is an arch, like covering over it. If there's a drain that's covered in Rosh Hashanah, I can pour it directly into that drain. Chum say, even if your courtyard or your roof is 100 amas, you can't pour it directly into the drain. If the drain starts in your area, you can't pour into the drain and watch it go straight out into the Rosh Hashanah. You can pour it on the roof. You can pour it on the roof, let the water go from the roof into the drain, but you didn't pour it directly into the drain, that's fine. We said that the area needs to be 4 amos to be able to use it, to be able to pour into it. Yeah, you can use the achsadra, which is like a portico, an open area, it's missing a wall. That's counted as the chatzar, and the chatzar also. Here we're talking about if they didn't make an Eruv, the one that made the uka has access to it. He's able to use that uka, that drain. The other one doesn't have access to the drain. So only the one that's allowed to use that area, which is his, is allowed to pour his water, but the other one isn't allowed to pour his water because he doesn't have access to that uka, to that wastewater. Okay, leave it over here. Have a good day, everyone.